Welcome to the Tuesday, November 2nd edition of the Rotowire NFL podcast brought to you by WinBet. I'm Joe Bartel here alongside me, as always, Jake Letarski. We're going through what is going to be a pivotal time today. We are hours before the NFL trade deadline. We have a number of critical pickups for people who might be missing Derrick Henry, Calvin Ridley, a couple other big names as well, too. And honestly, there might be injury news and updates as we continue on throughout the day because it was a heavy week 8 in terms of fantasy stuff. So, Jake, we are going to have all eyes on us today.
Yeah, absolutely. The NFL tends to have the weakest trade deadline in all of sports. So a lot of times it comes and goes without you barely noticing it's there. But obviously with the Derrick Henry news this week, you never know if the Titans are going to go out and try to make a move. There'll be a lot of moves. I mean, there are not a lot of fantasy relevant guys that could really be on the move. Brandon Cooks is one that comes to mind, but it seems like they're not really going to trade him.
Allen Robinson, we talked about last week.
Yeah, Allen Robinson, Odell Beckham, all these guys seem to get mentioned or talked about in a lot of years. But those are, outside of maybe another running back changing a backfield scenario, there's not a whole lot that could happen with this trade deadline. Now, granted, I say that, and while the show happens, we're going to get all the trades because that's how it always seems to work. But we'll see how that goes this year. Sometimes it's quiet. Most years it's quiet. I remember maybe one, but when I think it was Cooks and Golden Tate and all these other people were moving. But
yes,
usually fantasy football has a quiet trade deadline. So we'll focus a little on the Monday night game and then try and get you into some waivers for this week.
Yeah, I mean, the Rams kicked things off yesterday by trading for Von Miller. I was thinking a little bit more as a Packers fan how upset I am that Goody didn't make the move for Stephon Gilmore because the Rams more or less paid draft compensation to have the Broncos take on that salary. I wonder if there might be more trades like that as teams kind of solidify themselves as contenders or pretenders. But we'll find out. And if there's any action throughout the podcast, we will try to keep you up to date as best as possible.
Yeah. Definitely. If you're tuning in, drop something in the comments.
Yes. We can always use the help.
It's naive to think we actually have producers at this big fancy operation here. There's no producer in our ear. These are all made by us and, our one take published. So we could use a hand from our audience / producers out there if you catch a trade before we happen to.
Yeah, the one that's occurred this morning was Melvin Ingram being moved from the Steelers to the Chiefs for a 6th-round pick. That doesn't really move much of the fantasy needle, but if there does end up being a significant offensive player moved, we will certainly have you covered during the podcast. Let's move to our attention to the Monday night game, which saw those Chiefs who just acquired Melvin Ingram get a win, 2017. Of course, I needed Patrick Mahomes to get me 23 points, so he got me 20 points. Got a loss there. However, I did sneak out a 0.4 win because Graham Gano did not get a chance to kick that final field goal, possibly to tie the game for the Giants. Thank you, Daniel Jones and company, for stinking as an offense yet again. Thank you, Giants. There was some reasons for that, though, however. We had Sterling Shepard, who torpedoed my stake league chances of really making a comeback, get injured midway through. We had Kadarius Toney have his hand stepped on, and then he never came back into the game. Saquon Barkley didn't play. Kenny Galladay didn't play.
Tony came back into the game, I think. He was out there on the last drive. Yeah, he was out.
Fine.
See, he changed his story. It was a little weird. At first, there was an ankle thing, and then his hand got stepped on. I think he just probably had to go number 2, in all honesty. But
Lamar Jackson.
Yes, one of those. That's that's what I would think. But I don't know. We'll see on the injury report this week because the Giants, Sterling Shepard, hurt it was his quad or his hamstring, something bad.
It looked, it was a non-contact injury. It did not look good. I agree with you.
Yeah, he was down for a while. Now, the weird thing about the Giants offense, I guess we'll talk about them first, is, before the Toney injury, they game planned for him so hard on that first drive, and they gave him so much action. I think this week it was a case of him missing practice or being limited in practice, and they didn't know necessarily if they would even have him for the game. So he wasn't part of the game plan. He was the motion guy on jet sweeps a lot, and of course he threw a pass. So I guess that's in the playbook. But, after Shepard went down, there wasn't, he didn't necessarily see any more actions. And also Pettis went down real early in the game. With a punt, I think it was on a kick or a punt return or something like that. But with Galladay out, Shepard down. I mean, it was Darius Slayton got some work. Colin Johnson was in there. John Ross got a lot of looks. Even in the 2 wide, you'd almost needed a 3 wide receiver set for Toney to be relevant in this game, at least. But I'm going to, write that off as game planning and him missing practice. And if you give him a full practice, especially with this banged up receiving core, by no means, I'm still on the Toney hype train, and I'm not going to cut bait yet.
Yeah, I've been contending, we've done this on SiriusXM now the last 2 weeks, that the Giants for as much injuries as they've had at wide receiver, actually have a lot of depth there. I think Colin Johnson can be a starting caliber wide receiver, at least on some teams. I'd look at the Packers.
Real life, maybe not fantasy, but
You're right. And then John Ross certainly as a speed threat and would be a cheaper asset than Deshaun Jackson. There are those types of players that are available on the trade market right now in the NFL. And I think the Giants, where they're at right now, with that loss more or less cementing their status as not playoff relevant this season, could be a team that makes a move, but we'll have to kind of see. I was impressed and also confused that Frank Gore was still in the NFL, the Chiefs running back. And then I find out, it's actually Derek Gore that's come off practice squad. Actually looked pretty good. I was surprised with the ability that he was making, especially on those cuts, and he ran hard. But it was still Darrell Williams that was the PPR and 3-down workload guy. He got a few carries, certainly got a lot of targets. I think that role is especially important right now with Patrick Mahomes struggling to throw it deep. I mean, he's had to be the check down guy, and it hasn't been Travis Kelce, which feels weird to me. It really has been Darrell Williams who stepped up in a PPR capacity as a running back one.
Yeah, there's a lot going on with the Chiefs. First off, they don't look good yet. They got the win, but this was not pretty. And, this is against a team that they would normally and they should be blowing out of the water. By the way, the Giants aren't a playoff team, 2-6. The Cowboys are taking that division.
That's what I said. They've already fallen out of the
playoff. They're toast. So, but anyway, no, the Chiefs offense was interesting to me. I did a show last week where one of the questions that I was sent beforehand was, the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, is the game passing them by? And I laughed at that. I was like, come on, are you kidding me? They're down weak. And then I sit down and I watch this entire game from front to back. And there are definitely a few questionable things that are happening here. Number one is I think Mahomes is feeling some of the heat and he's trying to do a little bit too much. That was perfectly evident on the very first drive of the game when he was, in and out, dipping out of pressure, and then threw a ball that, just got tipped up and picked off, when they were in the red zone. And I think at that point, Louis Riddick came on the telecast and said 24% of their drives have ended in turnovers. I think Mahomes is starting to feel that heat a little bit. And the other thing that astounded me to some degree was, the Giants were giving them so much cushion. They were daring them to run the football. And they wouldn't run the football. And, Mahomes is looking at those middle and deep routes. And, granted, he could have got a little help from his receivers. Kelce wasn't as sure-handed as we're used to, especially with that fumble. He did make a big play, on one of the last drives. And they just don't want to run the ball, which is interesting. I mean, Darrell Williams had a fine fantasy day, helped out by 6 catches. Everyone thought Derek Gore, who, everyone on the telecast and everything is Frank Gore's grandson. Nope. The two are not related at all. Had to make sure to look that up beforehand. But there was one Derek Gore drive. We can talk about Derek Gore now because I did not include him in our waiver wire pickups for a couple of reasons. One, because there's basically one Derek Gore drive where they rode him. He was successful. It was good. But when the game was on the line and, all the chips were in, it was Darrell Williams out there in the fourth quarter. And, Darrell Williams actually was good as a pass catcher too. And the other reason, I'm not really interested at all in going after Derek Gore is because I believe we have Clyde Edwards-Helaire being now. Listen, Edwards-Helaire wasn't having the greatest of fantasy seasons. He wasn't even good. I mean, he wasn't graded well by Pro Football Focus. He wasn't elusive or breaking tackles, and he wasn't getting volume. So he's not necessarily a savior for anyone's season, but he is eligible to come back. Week 9 is his earliest possible return date, and guess where we're at? We're at week 9 here. So with Darrell Williams, McKinnon was a non-factor. Gore was a wild card. I think I saw a tweet that said he was 0.28% owned in the Millie Maker showdown. So we should probably investigate those people that stuck him in lineups. But yeah, so I mean, it was nice to see him on that one drive, but I'm not necessarily getting too excited about him, and I'm rushing to pick him up off the waiver wire. There are a handful of running backs we'll get to a little later in the show who seem to have better prospects moving forward.
I think you mentioned exactly why I'm not interested in Gore is that Edwards-Helaire is theoretically able to come off of injured reserve this week against the Packers. Whether or not he does remains to be seen. I think that's kind of an early timeline, and we haven't actually heard about him practicing yet, although we probably will this week. Guys like George Kittle, who are also eligible to turn off for injured reserve, have been practicing. There's a few of those injured reserve dudes. So no information would indicate to me maybe if Edwards-Helaire is able to play, he won't be at full capacity. In either scenario, that doesn't make me want to go ahead and pick up Gore in a 1 week type of deal, especially when there are some other names, whether they are going to be effective or not, we'll get to in a little bit, that will be out there. So I agree, 11 carries, 40 yards and a touchdown, and he looked good in that one drive. Fine. I don't know how deep of a format I would need to have to pick him up though. And that's the important context I think needs to be provided for this. So anything else from an offense perspective for the Giants or Chiefs that we need to mention for the, I think the Giants receivers again, with how banged up they are, but I don't know. We need to have more information later in the week. And they have their bye, which is going to impact things a little bit too.
Yeah, I mean, not a whole lot else on this game. Your weekly Josh Gordon update: 1 target, 0 catches, nothing to see there. Kelsey, the whole tight end landscape is weird. I think I don't have the exact stat in front of me, but I think only 3 of the top 10 scoring tight ends were like 20% rostered or more in Yahoo leagues this week, which is just crazy. You're getting production from where you least expect it, and you're not getting production. I mean, granted, it was tight end bye week with Waller and Andrews both gone, but Kittle's still on IR, and Kelsey underperforming like this. It almost makes me wonder if there's some kind of injury going on with Kelsey, or if it's one of those father time is undefeated things. But he definitely didn't look himself last night.
Yeah, I had mentioned the Giants are on bye next week. That's incorrect. They're on bye week 10. I was confused because Barkley's trying to play against the Raiders this week, despite there being a bye next week. It's a weird scenario.
Yeah.
You mentioned
we got Lions, Seahawks, Bucks, and the Washington football team on bye this week.
Yeah, I mean some pretty critical guys like DeAndre Swift, Alex Collins might have been a starter for many people. Certainly, we're on Chris Carson watch and Russell Wilson watch next week, of course, against the Packers.
I mean, the whole Tampa Bay team, pretty
exactly.
Much.
And
Scary Terry,
too,
Scary Terry, who is anything but scary on Halloween weekend.
Yeah, he did not live up to his namesake. A lot of big names, and hopefully, while we listen to the rest of this podcast, we get through the rest of the podcast, we can get a few of these guys, some possible replacements for you out there listening. So let's get a word from our sponsors here, WinBet, first, before we get into the quarterbacks and the rest of the Waiver Wire show. If there's one thing we appreciate here at Rotowire, it's making good decisions, and even more so, making the right decision. Listen up, folks. I have an incredible offer for you with Rotowire's newest partner, WinBet, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WinBet is now the exclusive sponsor for Rotowire's fantasy podcast. WinBet brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more right at your fingertips. If you want a break from sports betting, head to WinBet's digital casino and take a spin on roulette, double down blackjack, slantless odds, or try a hand of baccarat. WinBet is currently available in 6 states: Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, and Virginia. While rapidly expanding at WinBet, the possibilities are limitless. WinBet is currently offering all Rotowire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500 on your first wager. Download WinBet now. That's WYNNBET. WinBet, the exclusive partner for Rotowire's fantasy podcast. Okay, quarterbacks, obviously, we had a guy that I don't think anyone could have ever mentioned in White, who emerged, torpedoed my Bengals survivor team, as did many other people too. Oh yeah, exactly. And
he won that New Jersey guy $125K though.
Oh, good for him. I did not see that. No,
he bet $1,000 on Mike White to lead week 8 in passing at 125-1.
Do you ever wish you just had $1,000 to bet on absolutely random crap that should never hit?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's the kind of thing that I throw $5 down.
Right, exactly. Not like that's
about it, but
the fact that he throws $1,000 down, that's his version of $5, which is just annoying to me.
That's crazy. But I mean, geez, get a nice 6-figure payday out of that. That's a beautiful thing.
Second ever Jets quarterback to throw for 400 yards. That's another one. She's like, wow, crazy stat given their history. Yeah, Mike White, obviously insane. Shockingly, was not mentioned in our pickups. At least, I mean, like we talked about a 2 QB perspective a little bit, but I never would have guessed. He would have done that well.
I mean, they signed Flacco too, so it was like, okay, this Mike White guy that nobody's ever heard of, or are they going to just go ahead and get Flacco out there right away? Probably not enough time, but now Flacco's irrelevant, and I think Zach Wilson will be back at practice. I mean, Salah was non-committal. He was just like, oh, we'll see how practice goes,
Yeah, I don't think Wilson's not playing this week. They have targeted week 10 against the Bills as the possible return date for Wilson. And do you think Flacco can learn a full offense in a week? I don't know. It's tough. Given how good Mike White looked, I almost wonder if they go ahead and put him out there again this week. And
is he elite though?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, it's really
kidding. Yeah, maybe one more week to Mike White at best, but it's not a long-term thing. It's not like Minshew mania or anything like that.
Yeah, it almost feels more like Jeremy Lin kind of asked if we're going to do some cross-sport comparisons, where just how out of nowhere Mike White ended up being in that game. you're right. I don't know if he's the top pickup at quarterback this week. I actually think Taysom Hill is going to be one of the top overall pickups, not just at quarterback, with Jameis Winston now done for the season. Trevor Simeon filled in last week in that Buccaneers win with Hill on concussion protocol. I think it was 2 straight weeks now he's missed.
Yeah.
I would imagine there's going to be more of a urgency to get Hill off the concussion protocol when he more than likely profiles as the top starting quarterback. However, when Hill was the starter last season, the Saints didn't really have a Trevor Simeon-esque backup there. So I think it's possible that Hill just gets utilized more in the same role, just more often on the field. What's your take on this overall, though?
I don't know. It could be a 2-quarterback system. Now, looking at Hill here, the Saints had a week 6 bye, and then he's missed back-to-back games. So hopefully that's enough time to get him through concussion protocol. I don't know what his personal history is. So that'll be interesting. But, I mean, could they run a 2-quarterback system here? I mean, you got to think if you got to drive, the length of the field, if you're in the classic Phil Rivers situation, for example, down 7 with the length of the field, yeah, I know,
I had to laugh at that, but yes.
I mean, do you need your running gimmicky option quarterback in there, or do you put Simeon in there and hope for the best? I don't know. It could be a 2-quarterback system here, which is what. Listen, and I don't know that for sure. That's me speculating, but that's what kind of backs me off of this hype. If I'm looking for anyone to pick up this week, I think I would argue that the top, you go to the screamers and not necessarily the 2-quarterback guys. And Tua is only 35% rostered on Yahoo, and he gets a home matchup against the Texans here. So I think that has to be your number one pickup this week. And then we can kind of get through this grab bag of talent here. If you wanted to put Taysom Hill number 2, sure, I could live with that. There's a little upside there, but definitely not number 1.
Interesting that you put 2 there. I would sooner lean to Taysom Hill because I'm assuming he's going to be the starter, and he's got a matchup against the Falcons, who he decimated in his 2 starts last season. Like that adds a little bit of context to me. Doesn't have Mike Thomas. We didn't have Mike Thomas last year either, at least for one of those contests too.
Should have Mike Thomas soon, hopefully.
Soon. I mean,
who really knows?
We don't really know what Mike Thomas's status is going to be. I just think that Taysom Hill actually might be a better play. That's not to say that 2 is a bad play, though. I want to reinforce that the return of Devonte Parker seemed to be a big deal for that offense, which did marginally better against the Bills. It certainly wasn't as big of a blowout as their first time around when Tua got hurt, and then you had Jacoby Brissett in there.
And Will Fuller coming around eventually, maybe.
Yeah, eventually returning from injury reserve too. Yeah, I don't know. Is he able to come back this week? Like, do we know if that's revenge game narrative right against his former team, the Texans? I'm not positive.
No, I don't.
If that changes so. my analysis, I would rather have Taysom Hill, knowing he's going against the Falcons, than Tua, even though the Texans defense has been so brutally bad.
Yeah, for the record, Fuller's not going to practice this week, so no revenge game.
So no revenge game narrative just yet. Maybe if they meet in the playoffs in like some bizarro world, that some I don't know, like a Loki-esque alternate dimension.
Exactly. All right. So you want to do quick hitters for the rest of the quarterbacks?
Yeah, go ahead.
There's not a whole lot here. Obviously, Dak's coming back this week. That puts Cooper Rush out of consideration. I say obviously he's coming back. I'm talking about Jerry Jones' quote this morning. I think that they seem pretty confident that Dak's going to be back in the mix against the Packers on Thursday night, which feels like so long ago already after a long Halloween weekend. We got Kyler Murray. He suffered a medial ankle sprain versus the Packers, and he might be questionable this week. So, Colt McCoy maybe gets in your late week 2-quarterback league radar. They're keeping Colt McCoy ready, is what they say here. And then, of course, Sam Darnold had a concussion. I don't know his concussion history off the top of my head. I imagine with the Jets you get concussions just because, but I'm not sure about that. We'll see what happens with him. PJ Walker would be the backup, but he's probably like the bottom of my list here this week because he's got the Patriots, and the Patriots just made Justin Herbert look bad and silly and really, really ruined my fantasy week. If I could have got anything out of Herbert, man, I would have been 4-1 instead of 1-4. But again, that's what happens when you put all your eggs in one basket, and that is your quarterback grab bag for the week. If Deshaun Watson gets traded today, I don't know. I've got my phone here sitting, waiting for notifications on the Rotowire Fantasy News Center app for iPhone. You can turn on notifications for your top 100 players and for your custom league and watch list, so you get all your notifications there. That's what I'm looking at here off to the side.
Okay, that's good.
Yes, so my quarterback list and my plugs. Now we can go on to running backs.
Okay, let's move on to those running backs. Obviously, we had talked a little bit last week, but Salvon Ahmed, Kenny Gainwell, who just completely disappeared despite my very big need for him. Thank God for Jordan Howard to make sure I get very frustrated on my fantasy Sunday. Michael Carter was pretty massive. And I think at this point, if he is available in your leagues, is a top pickup regardless. It's just a matter of, will he be there? I think he was close to our 50%.
Yeah, he was around 60% last week. And I threw him out there because of the snap distribution. Now he's up at 68%. So it's unlikely, but
make it 100%. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this podcast and he's somehow available, make it 100%. I think he's a pretty clear-cut running back 2 or flex.
Yeah,
the rest
he's
of
not
the
even
he's
available in my 10-team league that I just checked. Rachel must be listening to the show, but anyway.
Yeah. Carry on with Michael Carter, and if he's available, go ahead and pick him up. The big news obviously has to be Derrick Henry, who appears to have suffered a season-ending injury in that win over the Colts. I thought he had like 20 more carries after breaking his foot, which is absurd to me and actually feels very Titan-esque from what I would have imagined. But here we go. Now it enters the scene where we talk about Jeremy McNichols and Adrian Peterson every single week. When that injury happened, I turned to some of my buddies in our group chat and said, I'm going to hate my job for the next 3 weeks because we are going to have to discuss Adrian Peterson and pretend like he's relevant for far too much. Like, I know you do a lot of radio hits. I do as well too, Jake. I'm not excited for answering the question literally every single time, saying, no, I'm not picking up Adrian Peterson. Neither should you. He can't fill the Derrick Henry role. Nobody can, but certainly not a 34-year-old Adrian Peterson who hasn't played in 10 weeks.
Yeah, so here's the thing. Now, when I first saw this story yesterday morning, I was thinking about it. You know, I'm trying to think, okay, what am I going to say on the show? And my first thought was, okay, let's just dump the rest of the fab money on Jeremy McNichols, right? You know, that's your easy one. He's the clear backup here. We weren't sure about the Adrian Peterson signing yet. Darrington Evans is on IR. Who else? Dontrell Hillard, if he's even active, is a special teamer here at best. Actually, he's not even on our depth chart.
He's a practice squad call-up guy, so I think he is part of the team and then just gets called up every other week.
Yeah, so right now, until Peterson gets officially activated here, it's McNichols and Peterson. Now, you look back at the history of McNichols here, I've seen nothing in his history to suggest that he's going to be an early down back. You know, that they didn't use him when he when Henry went down. They just kept using Henry, which, that's its own thing. But, looking at he's been in the league since 2017, bounced around San Francisco, Indianapolis, Jacksonville, now 2 years with Tennessee. And he has, now in these last couple of years with Tennessee, his career high was 47 carries in 2020. Now, granted, you have Henry there pretty much the whole time, but he's pretty much been the pass catching back. Even this year, he's been targeted 27 times, ended up with 21 receptions for 203 yards and a score. Third down back, great. PPR guy, great. I don't get excited about Adrian Peterson either, but Adrian Peterson is going to start these games and he's going to get first down and some second down carries here. So I don't think, upon evaluating this a little bit further, and they could always trade somebody while we're talking, right? Trade for somebody, acquire someone while we're talking right here, or, shortly after this show, after this live stream ends here. So McNichols, yes, he's the top fab pickup. 30% is fair, but somebody's going to dump. The Derrick Henry owner is going to dump whatever they have left on him. And listen, I'd be okay maybe not getting him, but someone's going to overpay. That always feels like it's the case. Is he the first waiver wire priority? If it's a PPR league, probably. I mean, I like what he can do in PPR and, based on what we've seen, but to think that he's going to get 30 touches a game just because he's the next man up for Henry is just wrong, I think.
So there's a couple of thoughts I have with this, and I guess I'll try to explain it as best I can in like an incremental step here. The Titans offense will not be able to function as well because they don't have their 6'4", 250-pound back who runs a 4.40. It and gets 30 carries a game. I mean, literally, they will not be able to do what they normally do. So if you're saying the 36, I was wrong, not 34. The 36-year-old Adrian Peterson needs to go ahead and take 15 to 20 of those Derrick Henry carries. By default, by definition, the Titans offense will not be as good. Adrian Peterson, despite his advanced age, was still managing almost 4 yards a carry with the Lions last season. So kudos to him. I know he's a surefire Hall of Famer and everything else like that. Mm-hmm. You can't say Adrian Peterson will be able to replicate even 80% of what Derrick Henry does for that offense. So by default, if
60% would be good.
Okay, fine, whatever. If Adrian Peterson is able to do 60%, maybe that does something. I don't believe he can be. The Titans offense will stink. it's going to stink. And by default, McNichols becomes a bigger priority when when the offense stinks. Like, I think he's going to have a bit more utility in a PPR perspective because they simply are going to struggle doing what they normally do. And by signing Adrian Peterson to the practice squad, to me, they're indicating we are going to still try to do what we were doing before. It's not going to work. And that's where I think Jeremy McNichols actually does make sense as a PPR perspective. You have mentioned 30% of the budget. That's what you're saying for McNichols.
I'm going to say 35%, and I know that's going to be low. So I mean, I still have faith in what he can do the rest of the year. And if you're running back desperate, like you lost Henry, I could see going more than that, especially if it's PPR. But I feel like that's going to be too low. I'm not down on him by any means. I think he'll be a plenty fine pickup. 12, 15 point a week guy, even, in a lot of weeks, especially, if he's getting those targets as they're trying to come back from the hole that they dug themselves out of early in the game. I just think that I'm going to be low compared to the industry, even though I'm not that low on him as a player to start with.
I think I'm willing to bet by the end of the day, if people are listening to this broadcast a little bit later on, everything we just mentioned about the Titans situation is going to be moot. I think they are the one team that makes sense to go ahead and go all in on a trade. I had tweeted kind of in jest, trade for Saquon Barkley. I really don't think that's that bad of a move. His contract's up. You get a compensatory pick when he signs elsewhere. That guy can fill the 80% of the Derrick Henry role much better than Adrian Peterson can. Let's go to a divisional rival like the Marlon Mack situation. Okay, Marlon Mack maybe goes to the Titans too. You're maybe paying a 4th or 5th round pick.
I feel like Marlon Mack is the one thing that could.
Do
really
they want to trade a division though?
And that's realistic. Yeah, no, that's fair.
That's that. So you have to entice the Colts to go ahead and do that move into the division and more or less wave their hand and say, we're not making the playoffs or 6 or 7 seed.
You want to swap AJ Dillon for AJ Brown?
Oh yeah, that'd be great. But I mean, like there just isn't many guys out there, and the Titans should make a move for Barkley. They won't, but they should. If we are stuck with Adrian Peterson as your running back by the end of the Tuesday broadcast that you're listening to this, Jeremy McNichols is my top pickup this week. I just don't think that's going to happen. And I want to make sure we stress that now as we're doing this at 10:43 Central Time AM, and we still have many, many hours yet to go before the end of the trade deadline. This situation should change. If there's one team in the NFL that's going to make a big move, it's the Titans.
Yeah. There are a lot of other kind of fringe backs that you can go for, if you're not quite ready to dump the whole budget on McNichols. I've actually got a pretty big list this week of guys that have been overlooked or forgot about. And I guess we can just take that from the top here. Now,
yeah, go ahead. Hit me with a few of these guys.
So the first one that came to mind that I wrote down was Carlos Hyde for the Jaguars. That Urban Meyer's got, some weird love for Hyde and the Ohio State days or whatever it is.
Right.
Robinson went out of the game with a lower leg injury, ankle, foot, whatever. It looks now, however, like he's day-to-day with this foot injury. So I think he probably escaped anything serious. I actually got offered DeAndre Hopkins for James Robinson in a league.
I think I turned that down. I think I turned that one down.
You want to keep James Robinson?
I think I do.
I kind of want to keep Hopkins, but it was the Derrick Henry owner who's like, I'm in running back hell. I got to do something. And I'm thinking, man, do I want DeAndre Hopkins on the best offense in the league? I don't know. Then I put myself in a bad running back situation because then I'd have Chubb and my RB2s like Singletary or someone bad. And I said, well, let's just wait for Fab and see if I can get McNichols. Then we'll see. But anyway, that's besides the point. So, Hyde isn't as high on the list as we had originally thought. We have to talk about the Eagles here. Boston Scott, Jordan Howard. What a mess. I mean, what a mess. I was just appalled by this whole situation. Now, granted, Kenneth Gainwell had his highest carry total of the entire season, and he actually had more carries than anyone else in the backfield. He had 13. Boston Scott had 12. Jordan Howard had 12. But Scott and Howard scored 2 touchdowns apiece, and Scott was the only one to be targeted, period, because they didn't throw the ball. It was a 44-6 blowout. I mean, it was the Lions. It was a mess. I'm sure you guys have seen that meme going around of, what a shame that I can't believe they would put this in a kid's Halloween basket. It just shows
the Lions tickets.
Tickets in a pair of can. That's probably gone around, up here in Wisconsin more than not. But anyway, okay, verbal memes, that's not good radio. Let's move on here. Real big bummer. I mean, Gainwell actually had the highest touch share percentage out of the entire backfield. But the infuriating part was that he didn't play at all in the first or the third quarter. And he was just 1 carry and 6 snaps before the fourth quarter. So that worries me a little bit. If you're going to pick up anyone from this backfield and expect the production to be moderate, at least sustainable, I think it's Boston Scott, because he started and he got some of the goal line carries. I don't think Jordan Howard will cut into that much. And Boston Scott also 44.6% of the snaps compared to 30.8% for Gainwell and 24.6% for Howard. So Scott's on the field more. He's a shade behind, the touch leader. But, if they're throwing Gainwell out there in the fourth quarter when the game's a blowout, that doesn't instill confidence either. So I think Scott's the guy to own until Sanders comes back. But, man, this offense is really, really messy.
Yeah, and this is important to note that Miles Sanders was placed on injured reserve Saturday, which means he's going to be out at least the next 3 weeks. It's the same reason why Darrell Williams was a top pickup for us. It's the same reason that we were recommending both Khalil Herbert and Damien Williams, because we knew the David Montgomery situation was going to be a long-term deal.
Damien Williams a cut now, by the way. I put him on my cut list in case we don't get to
that's
that.
Yep. Good to mention that one as well too. I think that's a really clear situation. So if I have Kenny Gainwell and I'm listening to this podcast, would you recommend dropping him for Boston Scott, or keep Gainwell and also try to get Boston Scott? It feels really wrong to roster 2 of these Eagles backs, but we are in this position right now with all the injuries going on that maybe you can make that work.
Yeah, so I got a relatable situation to this, and I'll tell you how I'm going to play with it. I drafted Miles Sanders at a bargain. It was like a 6th or 7th round pick in a 2 quarterback league or something. So I got him at a bargain. I ended up taking Gainwell later, and I kept Gainwell around. And eventually I cut Gainwell, I think during Bipocalypse, right? And then I picked him back up for 3% of my fab a week or 2 ago, because it was a 10-team league, not a ton of demand out there for him. After Sanders got hurt, of course, I started and flexed Gainwell this week, and now I'm out here thinking I'm going to drop Gainwell for either to get a second quarterback here,
or something like that,
or McNichols if I think I've got the fab budget to be able to get him. So, but I don't think I'd drop Gainwell for Boston Scott directly, because I don't know, this Eagles defense is bad. I think this blowout is a little bit of a mirage. I think they'll be playing more catch up, and the game flow will be more favorable towards Gainwell, down the stretch here. Of course, that's tough to say after the week that he had. I don't really think you can trust starting any of them, to be honest, for now. It's tough.
I'll interrupt you here only because this upcoming week, the Eagles face the Chargers. This should be a get-right game for that Chargers offense, in my opinion. They've had 2 bad ones with the Patriots and Ravens. This should be good for Herbert and company. So your 5 teams, you should feel confident in that. The Chargers defense cannot stop the run. This has been an ongoing issue the last 3 years, and I thought it was really evident. And one of the reasons why Herbert struggled as much as he did last week, because Damian Harris and company of the Patriots were able to just sit on the ball the entire time, and it drastically affected their rhythm. I think the Eagles, maybe not so much Jordan Howard, although he's going to get work. I think Boston Scott actually could be a start this week, knowing how bad that Chargers run defense is, because Scott can also be a pass catcher if and when they choose to go that route. Gainwell should be able to, but for the reason the Eagles aren't using him in that way. So I actually like Boston Scott as a flex pickup if you need to go that direction.
Yeah. Okay. I can buy that. Yeah. I mean, the Chargers are 30th against opposing running backs in as far as the 30th fewest, which means giving up the 3rd most points allowed to opposing running backs in standard formats here. The schedule after that, they got the Broncos and the Saints. That's tough. But then after that, it's all bottom 3rd teams of the league through week 17 through the end of the fantasy playoffs. So there will be a successful Eagles running back down the stretch here, but I'm not going to pretend to guess who just yet.
Yeah. Any other quick hitters that you want to kind of mention here from the running back position?
Yeah, we got a handful. Jeff Wilson alert. He's going to be coming off. I think he's designated to return, so he's coming back. And Elijah Mitchell's kind of is going to be limited in practice this week with a rib injury, so you definitely want to think of that. Again, I don't know how much you want the Saints offense now, with Hill at the helm, but Mark Ingram is only 37% rostered, and he pretty much had a role throughout Sunday's game. It was the primetime game on Fox, so I'm sure a lot of people saw that. Ingram was getting targeted. He was getting plenty of carries. I think that's actually, even as a Kamara owner, that I'm a little disappointed in that. But, if they keep feeding the ball to Kamara like he's Derrick Henry, he's going to end up like Derrick Henry. So I'd rather have him, active throughout the entirety of the season here. So he's one that, I threw on the list. We forget about the Ravens backfield because they were on a bye last week. But I want to quick let's see here, Ravens. I got the thing up right here. Yes. Okay. So, it's between, Latavius Murray and Devonte Freeman. Pretty gross. Latavius Murray has an ankle injury. We'll see if he's able to return after the bye. If not, I think Devonte Freeman is the pickup here because Freeman in the game before the bye, he started, got both the goal line carries and got almost 40% of the snap share to lead the entire thing and got more targets. So, touch share, snap share, target share, all of these things are in Freeman. So Freeman would be the guy to own if Murray doesn't play. I'll say that right there. And then, some quick hitters, if we don't believe Christian McCaffrey's coming back soon, Amir Abdullah cut into the workload a little bit. So that's interesting if you're in a deep league. Jarrett Patterson, pretty much for the Washington football team, he got the same amount of very similar in touches and carries as Antonio Gibson here. So that'll be one worth watching for really deeper leagues. The one thing you can't really talk me into is Rex Burkhead and the Texans. I just don't want any piece of the Texans. Once the Ingram trade happened last week, of course, this was after our show, I put a 12% bid down on David Johnson and started him and was sorely disappointed. There's still some hope for that when Tyrod Taylor comes back. But, it's just a mess there. Is there any of those guys that I mentioned that you're with me on or you want to elaborate on at all?
Yeah. So I guess I'd rank it this way again. If the Titans do not make any move, Jeremy McNichols is my top overall pickup this week and certainly at running back. Afterwards, I do have interest in Boston Scott as a pickup and start this week. From that point, though, it's really disgusting. I have no interest in Carlos Hyde in 12-team or lower formats. I think Robinson will be playing and will have the majority of the workload. If he gets injured, fine. Do you really want to have a backup in an offense that's one of the bottom third in the leagues? Not of interest to me necessarily. I think Latavius Murray does play. If Murray was going to be out this week, they would have just put him on injured reserve 2 weeks ago when this injury occurred. So by default, Murray will cut into Freeman's workload. I don't want Murray or Freeman really playing or using. I have to in the NFFC as like a bench option for Freeman, but I'm not excited about it. So Ingram probably is my next pickup overall, and I think he has utility the rest of the season. Not a valuable enough situation where I'm wasting top waiver wire claim on him or really putting any more than 5 to 8% of my free agent budget in, but I think that does get Ingram if you do want to go that direction.
Mm-hmm.
I think CMC is coming back either this week or next week, so don't care about Amir Abdullah. And Jarrett Patterson is interesting if Antonio Gibson goes down. Washington's also not a good offense, though, and they still have their bye week to work with, which
the bye week is this week.
Should give Gibson some more health, or some time to heal.
I mean, he's playing with a broken shin and, some other junk. So that's going to be rough. Someone mentioned Scotty Phillips in chat. Another Texans guy had 15 snaps. I mean, you'd have to be in a 20-team league for me to consider picking him up off the waiver wire. I don't see a whole lot there.
Yeah, I'm surprised we're talking about a 15-snap guy as somebody that's interesting for
a 15-snap guy for the Texans, no less. Yeah, I think honestly, I still think David. If you have to take a piece of the Texans' backfield, it's still got to be David Johnson, and I think there'll be improvement when there's more reasonable game flow and Tyrod Taylor's back. So
here, let's. I think the process for this is, and I think it's worthy to play it out. Let's say the Texans do trade David Johnson or Philip Lindsay or both. Then you have Rex Burkhead and Scottie Phillips as your 1 and 2 on a team that doesn't care and probably is fine utilizing some of their younger players. Would you have interest in picking up Scottie Phillips then?
If they trade both of their lead guys, which, I suppose they would do that. That's a Texans
there was a tweet earlier that they're listening to offers on both. Mm-hmm. That would imply people have sent in offers. I think that might be a lie, but that would be the scenario where Scottie Phillips has some fantasy value.
Listen, we really got to do some mental gymnastics to make this scenario work, right? So I guess, if every single one of these dominoes falls, then sure. But, I'm a little, I don't know. I'm not that excited about it on Tuesday. But again, that could change by Thursday. So we'll see.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure. So you mentioned Damien Williams as a cut. Any other guys that you're thinking you're just completely done with at this point?
Mm-hmm. Well, basically any Houston running back, right? Except I said maybe with David Johnson. Joshua Kelly was a healthy scratch for the Chargers, I believe. So, if you were rostering him thinking he'd be a backup, and then, we have to think about Singletary again. It's not been good. And the Bills surprisingly are just, they're not running the ball a whole lot. They got technically Singletary out rushed Moss, but what does that get you? A 3-point fantasy day? And he's not getting any of the targets. And it's Singletary's 5 consecutive games with single-digit PPR points and less than 50% of the snaps. That's what Jerry points out in his article. I mean, some shallow to medium depth leagues, I think there's a case to be made for cutting bait there.
All right. Before we move on to the wide receivers, let's get a word from our sponsors, Yahoo. The new NFL season's finally here and it's already started. And Yahoo's excited to continue on with their daily fantasy football. There'll be a ton of big prize contests throughout the season on Yahoo, including their multi-entry contest now being shark-free. To celebrate the start of the Yahoo daily fantasy football season and continuation of becoming shark-free, Yahoo is giving all users the opportunity to claim free $10 in contest entry credit. Users can take advantage of this free $10 contest entry credit offer to join one of Yahoo's biggest contests. In addition to the free credit, Yahoo has a $1 million DFS football contest live each and every week. The $1 million contest features $1 million, obviously, in total prizes, including first place receiving $100,000 and an entry to the first ever Yahoo Fantasy Football Championship live finals event, which will occur at the MGM National Harbor in Maryland this December. Play daily fantasy football on Yahoo this season. Visit sports.yahoo.com/dailyfantasy/welcome to claim the free $10 offer and get started. Okay, last week, wide receivers, we had discussed Randall Cobb. We correctly called that one, even though the two passing touchdowns really covered the majority of his workload. Still, I'll pat myself on the back. Russell Gage has some fantasy prominence now with Calvin Ridley possibly done for a while, tending to his mental health issues. Michael Gallup did not play against the Vikings, but certainly seems to be on the rise. But yeah, those guys, great. I think we have to kind of circle our way back to Russell Gage and company now with Calvin Ridley out, though.
Yeah, so Russell Gage, that's a very interesting situation we have here. Dang it, I do not have wide receiver snap counts for Atlanta for whatever reason. We're gonna have to see what our tech team's doing against that. But I believe Gage was out there. Listen, I'm gonna try to do this from memory. He was out there for 36 snaps and was targeted 0 times in that game. Meanwhile, Tajay Sharp was out there and he tied for a team high with 6 targets. Now, granted, with Ridley out, this team's wide receiver 1 is Kyle Pitts, I think, even though he had a pretty disappointing game. He is the really only guy you can really trust in a jump ball situation down on the sidelines or, wherever on the field or move the chains. So, with him aside, obviously playing tight end, Gage still interests me. He interests me more than someone like Olamide Zacchaeus or something like that. But the Tajay Sharp thing, that got to me a little bit, made me think maybe Gage isn't 100% healthy. But both these guys are viable emergency start options here if you find yourself hampered by bye weeks this week.
Is Tajay Sharp's numbers like Hunter Renfrow PPR stats? I mean, that's kind of like our baseline every single week. He'll get you the Hunter Renfrow numbers. I think Sharp could be in a full point PPR league, but I'm also not going to be aggressively targeting Hunter Renfrow numbers.
So I have Hunter Renfrow in Stake League, and that's always the one that I use to make this Gage. I will not be dropping Hunter Renfrow for Tajay Sharp.
Okay. I will drop Hunter Renfrow for Devonte Parker, who is bizarrely rostered in only 35% of Yahoo leagues right now. I can tell you for certain I was fine sitting out the 3 or 4 weeks that he was injured, and maybe the media attention on Tua struggling as a quarterback had something to do with it. But Devonte Parker returns. Lo and behold, Tua looks okay as a quarterback. And more importantly, he immediately became the number 1 option again, even though Jalen Waddle was around and effective enough for the Dolphins. I love Devonte Parker given his skill set. And while he does, for whatever the reason, like oddly own the Bills each and every year, I think he is still a very capable wide receiver 3 for most fantasy formats, even 10 teams and less.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you there. I almost left off Devonte Parker, but then I saw him on some lists out there and I looked and sure enough, only 35% rostered. I mean, this is a guy who was, a mid-round pick at one point. He's always had plenty of hype. He's a good player. I believe that. And now he's starting to get his shot is continuing and he's finally at a place where he seems to be settling in. He's getting plenty of volume there. He outplayed Waddle for sure this week. So, I would say he's the top. It would be tough between him and Gallup if Gallup gets cleared because but
I'll gladly take Parker. I'll gladly take Parker in that instance because Gallup has to share the field with so many other guys who now have gotten a bit more of a rapport with Dak Prescott and that offense. Whereas Devontae Parker, it was clear the need was necessary from that Dolphins offense. I think Parker, so long as he's healthy, is certainly a top pickup.
Yeah, and the other thing, this Miami thing, this is what I was looking up while you were doing your thing. It's basically their base offense is a 2 wide receiver set. Devontae Parker was on the field for 90.6% of snaps, Waddle for 93.8%, and the only other receiver Isaiah Ford, a little more than 10%. I mean, with Will Fuller not practicing another week, we're looking for big volume weeks for Parker and Waddle. And, if you give me Parker and Waddle head to head, Waddle might have the better career, but right now Parker's the better player. So, I can get with you there. He's a guy that you can pick up and start now and be confident about long term.
We had a question in the chat about Darnell Mooney as a top pickup as well. He had 6 catches for 56 yards. I'm sorry, 6 catches for 64 yards in that loss to the Niners. Obviously, Justin Fields did some things from a running perspective. I thought he actually looked pretty good as a quarterback overall too. And Mooney's had some success. He had the 5-catch game against the Packers a couple weeks ago, and obviously had an insane game against the Lions earlier this season. I feel like Justin Fields kind of limits the upside, but Mooney is a known commodity, I think, as well. And if Allen Robinson to be traded, is going to be for sure a guy that is a workhorse wide receiver in an offense that doesn't use their wide receivers very much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he is the one wide receiver worth rostering in that offense here. I don't need to talk about my cut Allen Robinson rant again. Maybe he'll get traded and
yes,
save
that's
his
the hope, I
fantasy
think.
season. But yeah, no, Mooney's consistently. Cole Kmet is maybe the top receiver in that offense, but Mooney is consistently outproducing and outsnapping the rest of the wide receivers in that offense. He's a fine pickup, but only 42% rostered. I'd still rather have Parker, who is less rostered.
Okay. I had just saw my Twitter pop up with 32 different notifications. I'm like, oh no, who got traded? Who is it? But nobody of note right now. There was like a small trade that Rappaport reported regarding, I don't even know this guy. The Texans are trading young pass rusher Charles Omwenu to the Niners for late round draft picks. So, okay, great. Thanks, Rappaport. I'm glad you are on that one overall. Mm-hmm. So let's continue on with the wide receivers. We discussed Parker, Russell Gage, and Tajay Sharp. Deebo Samuel did have a bit of an injury with his calf. 7 targets for Mr. Brandon Ayuk, who somehow, how is he rostered in 51% of leagues, but Parker's at 35%? Whoever's playing in those leagues is failing themselves, and that's fine.
I think pre-draft rankings for inactive leagues is the reason that you can that he's more active.
All right. Anyway, Ayuk kind of had a bit of emergence, but Deebo Samuel obviously was insane as well in that win over the Niners. I'm still not comfortable rostering Ayuk given that Niners offense. I guess if Samuel's out by default, Ayuk will have to get an opportunity. And honestly, what we saw last year, once he gets a chance to get out of Kyle Shanahan's bandwagon, out of the doghouse, he should be able to. He's got enough talent. It's just a matter of will that opportunity ever occur.
And they like him in the red zone now. He's caught. Some of the 49er games I've seen. Granted, a lot of it's on red zone, but they do go to him in the red zone sometimes. And it hasn't always been great passes or he has to make acrobatic efforts or it's well defended. But he's someone they go to in the red zone. But the only other side of that is Kittle's going to have his practice window open, and he's definitely going to eat up some target share on that team. So that makes me a little bit hesitant, but. I don't know. I'm a fan of, evaluating your roster from top to bottom every week. And if there's dead weight on your roster and Ayuk is out there, I think he's someone that has potential to grow, and is better than most dead weight.
Yeah, I agree with you. Jalen Reagor had to be carted off in that dominating win over the Lions with an ankle injury. I don't know. Quez Watkins is a guy that I picked up in a few deeper leagues because he was getting a few targets. Maybe he ends up being a guy that can get the Hunter Renfrow numbers. What do you think?
Yeah, again, not going to drop Renfrow for Quez Watkins. We need to pick a baseline that's easier to say here. But the interesting part is Quez outsnapped everybody in that game. 88.7% compared to 66.1 for Devonta and 48.4% for Greg Ward. I think Watkins was out there on the field anyway in a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. He's been over 50% snap share in every game since week 1. So he's out there already. Greg Ward maybe takes a little bit of a bump up, but I'm not necessarily rushing to get Greg Ward. I think Quez Watkins is the receiver to roster in that Philadelphia offense if Reagor has to miss time.
And then real quick, we had Van Jefferson, who could see an emergence if Deshaun Jackson gets traded, had 3 catches for 88 yards. And then we also had Cedric Wilson have a pretty good game with Cooper Rush. Cedric Wilson's been inconsistent, I think, at times, and certainly a boomer bust. He's the perfect best ball wide receiver that you're drafting around 20 later.
He is my mental note to use in showdowns if the Cowboys have to start Cooper Rush again. That's about it.
I mean, Wilson had a couple of games with Prescott too, where he had some utility. So it's not just the Cooper Rush show, but either way, I don't really care about Van Jefferson at all. I
Yeah.
think he's way too boomer bust, and Wilson's even worse of a boomer bust candidate as well too.
Yeah, definitely fair enough, and especially with Gallup coming back, But the encouraging part is there were three Rams receivers, 83% or more in snap count, and Van Jefferson was definitely one of them. He was on the field for 95% of snaps. It seems like they're using less two tight end and more three receiver sets here in the offense, and that means Jefferson's out there. So it's a high-powered offense with the number one receiver in the league in Cooper Kupp, who commands a lot of attention here. He's rosterable. He's better than a guy sitting on IR occupying your bench spot.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's get a word from our sponsors, Thrive Fantasy. Thrive is back for another season of fantasy football, and they're running huge guaranteed contests each and every week. With Thrive Fantasy, you can eliminate the countless hours of research and focus on only the top-tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game. Sign up today and get a free 6th-month Rotowire subscription. Well, here's how you claim that subscription. You go to rotowire.com/thrive, deposit a minimum of $10, and receive 100% deposit bonus back up to $100. Then you play in your first paid contest, and boom, you get to receive a free 6-month Rotowire subscription. Again, go to rotowire.com/thrive, deposit a minimum of $10, and receive 100% deposit bonus back up to $100. And then you play in your first paid contest and receive that free 6-month Rotowire subscription. Let's also get a word from our sponsors, Blue Wire. Okay, we're back. We're talking tight ends right now. And honestly, Jake, there was a bit of breaking news, or I guess from a tweeting perspective. We had Jeremy Fowler of ESPN report the Packers are actively searching their options for different tight ends. We had talked about DeGuara last week with Robert Tonyan out. Tonyan now obviously on injured reserve. The Packers are reportedly sniffing around Evan Ingram and a few other guys. I was curious, if DeGuara was going to be a pickup at all for you this week, and if the Packers were to say, let's trade for Evan Ingram, who's possibly rostered under 50% of Yahoo leagues, would that be enticing to you at all?
Yeah, so that's a tough one. I mean, Mercedes Lewis will be primarily a blocker with the occasional target here and there. I don't see his role changing. It's DeGuara that if they don't trade for someone, that would be the guy. But on Thursday night, he didn't really know the playbook. It seems like they tried to put him in some Tonyan situations and he was confused and lining up in wrong places. I'm sure obviously with a week of prep to be that guy, you can get it figured out, but that was a little bit concerning. But if you do have to pick a Packers tight end, I think he would be it. And then, yeah, like you said, you link this tweet here, Jeremy Fowler at ESPN, throwing out some options there. Evan Ingram's obviously expensive. The Giants would have to eat a lot of that contract, so the Packers don't get into cap trouble. Hayden Hurst, Jordan Akins, Jacob Hollister. I mean, I'm sure Rodgers would be appreciative if they went out and got somebody. So, maybe that's enough to keep me off making a bid on DeGuara. We'll wait this deadline out here and see what happens. And, then maybe you can pick him up for nothing afterwards. But the big tight end, the star of the show here that I want to talk about, his ownership is low because they are entering a bye. But I was very, very surprised to see Logan Thomas is only 51% rostered on Yahoo. I think if you want to get him for a reasonable price, you need to go ahead and get him now. And he's a tight end that you could actually just leave as your starter the rest of the season because, there's a chance that he's back after the bye here. There's a chance that Fitzmagic comes back after the bye and we kind of get it going. I mean, he's during yesterday's practice, Thomas was he was working out on the side individual. So it doesn't mean he's ready for a full return here. He's already spent the 3-game minimum on the injured reserve. So he could be eligible Sunday against Denver, but Rivera doesn't seem optimistic yet. I'm basically reading the player note at this point. He's week to week, but he's a guy that, could come back after the bye and actually make a huge difference maker. I think he steps in and starts over Ricky Seals-Jones right away.
Immediately, yeah.
And he they paid him all that money, right? So he's unquestionably the guy that's going to get the targets and be the impactful performer there. So that's the first name you're looking for. Logan Thomas, 51% rostered. I do think we need to come back to your boy, Dan Arnold, who had 10 targets against Seattle this week. Do you feel vindicated?
Vindicated? I don't know. I've been confidently using him as a flex-ish in my deep NFFC league, and it's been okay. I mean, I've been happy enough that Jaguars offense is just miserably bad, and a miserably bad offense would feature Dan Arnold. So those 2 and 2 make complete sense to me. They went out and acquired him as well too. And I thought that was clear that Urban Meyer got, the love for the Arnold laner. I don't know. I think Dan Arnold is certainly a worthy pickup. I was interested actually. I had a friend text me pretty much before kickoff, Pat Froymuth I'm saying that name probably incorrectly. Freiermuth, thank you. The second round pick for the Steelers with Eric Ebron out. Would he do well? And actually, Freiermuth got the touchdown catch. It was a great play, obviously, and kind of salvaged his fantasy day. It was either Freiermuth or Dan Arnold. I liked Freiermuth with Ebron out, and I wonder if Ebron is out again. Is Freiermuth a guy that maybe sneaks into your bottom 12 tight ends in a 12-team league that you maybe play?
Yeah, I mean, sure, absolutely. I included him on the list. I like him. He is on the field for more snaps, the third most snaps among pass catchers there for the Steelers. So after Johnson and Claypool, and Najee Harris, I guess he's seen the field more than James Washington. He's running routes. No, I'm fine with that. Big Ben has always liked a tight end,
right?
And he's somebody that, could absolutely continue to play well with Ebron out. So, but I think it might be limited to Ebron being out here. Dan Arnold, on the other hand, if he sees this type of target volume, he could be consistent on a week-to-week basis here. So those are the two guys I'm looking at if nothing shakes out with the Packers and Logan Thomas is unavailable.
Yeah, I think that's a great breakdown. Real quick, let's get to the defenses. We had featured the Bengals. Not a great choice. Obviously, the Chargers, not a great choice. Hey, the Seahawks at least did something as well, too, this past week. Now we have the Saints defense at 47% roster right now. Just had that pick six against Tom Brady, which won them the game. Obviously, looked pretty good. They have been a decent defense, not from a fantasy perspective at times, but they're 47% rostered against Matt Ryan, who'll be missing Calvin Ridley. Obviously, you have the Chargers against that Eagles offense, which is still using Jordan Howard. I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I think it's the Dolphins as well, too, against the Texans at 13% rostered. But we know how bad the Dolphins have been just overall as a team. And it's possible Tyrod Taylor or Davis Mills has the Texans offense kind of churning a little bit more.
Yeah, well, we can't pick on the Lions because they're on a bye. So, of course, we go to the Texans to pick on. Miami at 13% rostered in Yahoo formats will be just fine. I still think you have to go to New Orleans because this is a defense that is getting better. They are extremely difficult, if not impossible, to run up the middle on. And, 47% rostered, that's fine. So, sure. I mean, you go with New Orleans as the one to pick up and hope, maybe get some more starts out of rest of season. But, the Chargers, after that, you're looking at, some defenses that can maybe create turnovers. So you're thinking maybe Hurts will turn the ball over or one of these, new Philly players that has to be inserted in this offense will turn the ball over. Same thing, looking the other way in that Saints Falcons game. I'm not necessarily advocating you pick up Atlanta, but if Hill's not good to go and it's Trevor Simeon starting, I mean, you can do worse than Atlanta for sure. So that's kind of what I have there for streaming defenses.
Okay, fair enough. I don't really have any others. I would be going out and getting the Dolphins in leagues where I am doing that. And I don't feel great about it. That's kind of my assessment overall. And that's what the streaming week is with those four teams I'm by at the moment.
Yeah. Let's hit a couple of these chats before we, I just want to acknowledge some of them, because I thank everybody for jumping in. Danny Wallace, I don't understand your question. Get at us on Twitter and maybe we can help you out.
JB Fantasy Sports or at Roto Jake.
And Derek Gore, we discussed in the beginning of the show, but long story short, he did not make our top 3 running back pickups this week.
Yeah, and I empathize with Miran Kidd, who had Derrick Henry for the first time, what feels like forever, and of course he gets hurt. I just want to say it just felt like we were due for this kind of letdown in the NFL season with all the other injuries that have been piling up at the running back position.
30 seconds. We redraft today. Who's number 1 pick?
I'm still taking Dalvin Cook.
Probably Dalvin Cook.
Someone's going to say Cooper Kupp, and I don't know if that's wrong, honestly.
I still think it's, the 0 RB crowd will get me, but I think it's either Cook, Kamara, Taylor, or Najee Harris. It's one of those 4 with Coop mixed in there.
Yeah, and Najee Harris is getting all the volume, even though the offense has been ineffective. I don't think he's looked as good as people thought he would, but yet he's getting so much workload. Doesn't matter. Yeah, I think Cooper Kupp makes a really legitimate case given his performances, and he certainly has had some major highs. I think this week he probably won you games. If
he gets 30 points a week, he's glorious. I love him.
Yeah. All right. That does it for us on the Tuesday edition of the Rotowire NFL podcast, the Waiver Wire, and at least today, the trade deadline version as well, too. Kind of mundane. I was hoping we'd have more trade deadline news as the podcast went on. Stay tuned to our Twitter accounts because we will try to recap any waiver wire moves that might be necessary for your teams based off of trades that may or may not occur. You mentioned at the top of the broadcast, though, trade deadline for the NFL is normally a little bit
Mhm.
lesser than the other sports, and I think we saw that come to fruition today. So
Yeah,
thanks everyone for
once a
listening.
decade we get a full moon, but normally not. I didn't mean to interrupt your sign off there. Go ahead and,
That's
and
okay.
wrap
I was just gonna say,
and wrap us up. Bring us home.
yeah. Thanks everyone for listening, and best of luck for your Week 9 fantasy football lineups.
Neat.
I'm just ending it. Yeah.